What's going on, world? What's going on, gamers? What's going on, Japan? So we have an Ubisoft insider here who exposes, reveals, shows some information about the woke industry being in full panic mode. But not only that, but just how it is kind of like a boot camp and why you saw so many layoffs and why layoffs happen and how they're literally on hush mouth and how it's hard for them to even fight back against anything they don't want to do. And we've known this for a while. Um, because I've been telling people that in my videos that I've covered on the Assassin's Creed controversy, like how it's not developers that are doing this, it's them being enforced to do things. And we're gonna figure out in this video as we react along the way. So let me know what y'all think as we get through this. Like, subscribe, help the channel out. You know, I'll be doing this for years. I ain't going nowhere, doing epic gaming content, streaming all types of stuff, doing Dragon Ball right now. So check out that content when I do that. All right, y'all, let's get into this. Dragon Ball is amazing, by the way.
On and I got some more information about Ubisoft I figured I should probably tell you all about. I spoke to some sources which have been in games for a very long time. These sources have worked at Ubisoft in a higher position than you would even expect. Obviously, I promised them I wouldn't say more than that. They didn't even want me to list which franchises they've worked on within Ubisoft. And they also told
So we see that he has information from them if he's being genuine. We see that, and obviously, uh, the game to play is that they're not going to reveal anything to me. I'm going to take the benefit of the doubt and give him that, and let's see what he has to say.
me not to tell you guys what other IPs they've worked on at other studios, so I promised them that I wouldn't. I could tell the entire time that I spoke to this source that they were very timid and nervous about speaking to me in the first place. Beyond what they told me, I want to also share some other information I've heard about other dev studios like Funcom and their upcoming game Dune Awakening, and even CD Projekt Red, which makes Cyberpunk and Witcher, and then there's some other more public things we can talk about from other websites too. Okay, let's start. Firstly, this source told me that the way AAA is right now is leading to an inevitable gaming crash.
Yeah,
They
we see
told me
that.
that waiting for this crash to happen is pointless because, in their opinion, we are already within a gaming crash right now, Western wise, anyways, as they specified. They also told me that they were shocked when they heard that Tencent was in talks to take Ubisoft private or outright buy them. As this source, which I said has a lot of experience in the industry, they claim that Tencent only buys profitable companies that are doing well. And they were puzzled as to why Tencent would go out of their way to buy a company like Ubisoft that has been struggling for so long publicly. Although we both surmise in our audio call that the likelihood is that Tencent isn't really after Ubisoft as a company per se, but it's actually the IPs that they own. Because Ubisoft be damned, they're
That makes sense. Exactly, because of what they have and what they can do with that, and how they can turn all those IPs into mass profit, put their MTX on there, you know, get their management, whipping them in shape, after the stuff that's going on, because Chinese Communist Party is pushing that, but they're doing that to get the IPs. That makes more sense rather than the value of where they're at right now. That's just to get them cheaper to get to the IPs, because Ubisoft has a ton of IPs if you think about it. So that would just make the Chinese Communist Party more powerful.
portfolio is full of lucrative IP that is ready for the taking. Assassin's Creed alone is worth over a billion most likely, not to mention all the Tom Clancy stuff like Rainbow Six and more. Hopefully if Ubisoft's IPs get bought, maybe I can get a sequel to Child of Light, but I don't have much hope for that these days
I
either.
love that game.
This source is also skeptical about Tencent buying Ubisoft outright because they believe that French laws will step in to stop the acquisition from happening 100%. They believe due to how the French government is, even if Tencent were to somehow acquire more of Ubisoft, the actual identity of Ubisoft would be protected due to its national identity being so closely tied to France. They told me the real reason why many games are failing is down to overspending, inflation, and bloat at studios across the industry. From what they have seen firsthand working on many AAA games themselves, the budgets of these games are completely out of whack about 99% of the time. They told me it's also not
I can believe that because I mean it does get ridiculous. You don't see Nintendo doing that, or other Japanese studios, or even like Korean studios. Only in the West where they do that, and it's like, what are you doing? But then you see these agendas, like I said, they know what they want to do. It's not an accident, and plus they're being funded big time.
any single dev's fault as to how things necessarily turn out in AAA due to how massive these companies are, especially places like Ubisoft. They told me that they roll their eyes whenever they hear anyone on the internet claim that they would do this character design differently or this gameplay mechanic this way if they had the power to do so. Because the reality is that in AAA studios, every single thing that gets added to a game has to go through so many different departments in order for it to get approved. And then there's plenty of times you don't even know who's exactly approving your work these days either. For example, changing a character's design is not actually up to the character artist. As they were saying to me, most character artists in modern gaming studios tend to create upwards of 20 plus variants of any which character in a game. And then the actual decisions are then decided by the higher ups, which is obvious to everyone. I think we all know that. But
Yep.
they said that they hope by speaking to me that I can relay to the internet that it's not necessarily your artists or designers that are to blame that games like Concord happen. It's this very tiny minority of people at the top who are actually deciding everything. And they told
So that's nothing new. There you go again. Now they're in the gaming industry because I tell people how big the gaming industry now compared to what it used to be. They weren't here before. But now you got the Chinese Communist Party. Now you got the far left. And now you got all of them in the gaming industry trying to control it because they see that's where the most money's at. And it's the biggest entertainment industry in the world now, and industry in general. So it used to be Hollywood and all those worlds, but now gaming is way bigger than them. So here goes these scumbags coming in here doing the same thing here. And that just shows you that the weirdos and the Satanists and all of them are pushing their agendas into this world and trying to enforce it with their religious cult. This is what they are.
me that it saddens them to see ordinary people at places like Ubisoft who will likely get axed and lose their jobs over decisions that they had no power in making themselves.
That
It's a
is,
tale as old as time at this point, sadly. Out of touch executives demand something, then the grunts do the work, only for the decision made not to work in their favor. And instead of getting rid of the executive who was responsible for the decision in the first place, the people
so you see what I mean? That's like a boot camp. That's like slavery. Looking at them as grunts just to obey my commands, and you're gonna enforce into the game what I want. You don't have any free will. That's slavery. And I'm gonna get other people to do cheap layoffs. You see, it's the same thing that's been going on in the world now. Now they're trying to implant that in the gaming industry.
who were just doing what they were told get fired and blamed instead. They say that they hope players have more compassion for devs in the industry and realize that a lot of the issues plaguing the industry are actually out of a lot of these devs' hands. They did
Mm-hmm.
tell me that because of how corporate structure is by design, especially at places like Ubisoft, that speaking out against anything that is considered political or activism like can and will lead to you getting fired and likely blacklisted as well. They say that there's a very bad case of tone deaf leadership that has completely disconnected itself from the wants and needs of players across the industry.
Doesn't that sound like what happens in Hollywood? Say anything, lose your job, get blacklisted, make up a bunch of stuff on you, all that type of stuff, and you get to be the scapegoat and stuff like that, or the sacrifice.
For example, another source I was talking to told me that CD Projekt Red is in absolute chaos right now,
Makes
based
sense.
on who actually is still working there that used to work on the previous games. Apparently, lots of senior talent has already left CD Projekt Red. For example, the director of Witcher 3 has long left the studio, and they've already created their own studio with their own new game as well. Apparently, places like Warhorse Studios, the makers of Kingdom Come Deliverance, they have actually been poaching talent from CD Projekt Red like crazy these past few years. And I was told that problems that are plaguing Ubisoft, like diversity hires, are also starting to damage and ruin CD Projekt Red as well. According to that other source, CD Projekt has begun to rely heavily on outsourcing to contractors to help with their games because the new talent that they have is nowhere near where they need them to be right now. I was told the reason why
That's
the next
annoying.
Witcher is using Unreal Engine instead of the Red Engine that previous games did is largely because most of the senior talent that worked and understood the Red Engine are not at CD anymore, and Unreal is more of a one-size-fits-all sort of engine than many devs are familiar with these days. But in general, we have been seeing lots of recent game studios stating that they're switching to Unreal over their own in-house engines. A great example that was recent was Halo Studios, which was formerly known as 343 Industries.
What he's saying makes a lot of sense because now Halo has those weirdos up in there too. Because Unreal Engine is kind of like a toggle switch where it can make things for you. Real developers back then, definitely in the 90s, you had to custom code everything. You really had to know what you're doing. It's something that you loved doing. When you're in that position, you're qualified, right? And now we see that this is being used for unqualification and weirdo agendas and just stuff that just doesn't belong in the gaming industry whatsoever. Bunch of scumbags. I can't stand them. Can't wait for them to get wiped out.
also confirming that they're making the next Halo game in Unreal as well. This is all being done because it's easier to understand, and Unreal makes it much easier to port your games to various consoles. So it's both a business decision, but also because newer age devs are not seasoned with a lot of what made previous games work. But as I'm told, CD Projekt Red right now is in a very tough spot, and they're apparently hoping that their pedigree is going to carry these games to millions in sales. But I truly hope
So you see what they're trying to do. They're trying to ruin our industry, replace it with a weird freak show, a religious cult, a bunch of just lunatics, cross-dressers, enforcing things into our games that and studios that we paid for a long time, while trying to find ways to make even more money. Yeah, it sounds like the Deadly Sins. Um, I mean, it's just really annoying. And guys, the best way to deal with this is to let all these games be a Concord, so we can send a message back to them. Because we as gamers and y'all have to understand you have more power than you think against this. So you all have to keep making the right and intelligent decisions to get rid of this trash and get it out of here. It's the only way.
whatever comes from the next Witcher or Cyberpunk, that it isn't a repeat of 2077's launch, because they can't afford another disaster like that again. Circling back to what my Ubisoft insider was telling me, they said another big reason why the game industry is hurting is because the growth that the industry was experiencing has begun to plateau, if you will. Before, we would have multiple years in a row where the industry would be growing 10 to even 15% year over year. Now, the industry is expected to grow about 6% overall by 2028 to become an industry worth over $250 billion. Which, yes, that's a lot of money, but it's a far cry from the mammoth growth of the 2010s. As my sources told me,
Yeah.
the real battle right now brewing in these companies is a battle of the eyes. Because of this stagnant growth, the amount of eyes out there, or people I guess you could say, that can be reached is limited to a degree. So this battle of spending billions to make these games to steal players from other live service games has created what I can only call a whirlpool straight to the bottom. These companies are all insanely competitive, we know this, and they are constantly trying to poach players from other games as these live service competitors try to feed their own games instead of other ones. As I'm told, this dev believes that less than 1% of mobile games that are made become profitable as well in today's age. And this trend is sadly not changing. I mean, back in 2014, only around 0.15% of mobile games attributed for about 50% of the gross income from players.
Yeah, it shouldn't be that high. Like I said, that goes back to China. Another thing, just like, can we play real video games here where I earn something out of playing the game with other people and, other games too, instead of trying to turn it into a gambling machine and making people having gambling habits and jacking up the price of everything where you're paying $110, $120 for games now, 130. You see what I mean? Like, no, it's cancer.
Flash forward to now, and the exact number that I was given by this dev that it's somewhere more like 0.03% of mobile games gaining most of the revenue these days. So that's a lot of flops. That's pretty much almost all mobile games are a flop at that point. I know that sounds insane, but this trend has had many studios and devs pushing their games franchises to mimic what these successful phone games or live service offerings are now doing. It's also why you're seeing it in the console space and beyond. It's why stuff like Suicide Squad was randomly made into a live service game by a developer who, had really zero experience in that field. It also didn't help that the DEI Sweet Baby stuff turned players away on top of that. But this corporate greed is a big reason why so many game studios and publishers are just bleeding money right now. I asked this
Mm-hmm.
insider source what they thought of Sweet Baby, and they told me that they see all of those consulting groups to be plagues in the industry. They said that good, honest devs are paying the price for the moronic decisions that are being made by consulting firms. This also
Yep.
ties into localization. I've played plenty of games that have sadly had poor localization at times. For example, the new Metaphor ReFantazio apparently also has localization problems, which is unfortunate because one of the hardest things to fix in the gaming industry right now is the localizer problem. Because by and large, these localizers are paid for their work and they never have to face their own actions when it comes to what they did on the game itself. Metaphor looks great. I don't want people to boycott that game,
Yeah,
but it is a shame
94 meta. I'm seeing Atlas is on fire lately. I mean, they're becoming top developers big time. Japan is carrying the gaming industry again. I mean, they really are. And he's right about the localization issues because you only start to see Japanese and English now. It used to have a lot more localization translations, but with all this weird stuff going on, I mean, I don't blame them. And they're just like greedy, and it's harder to deal with hiring now. Definitely when you have that pull in there now, I don't blame them.
that it has localization problems in the first place. Same goes with Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, which I'm playing right now, and so many others. All these games and more have
It does. You see right here, I got Dragon Ball right here, yo. I'm loving it. It's amazing. But it only has two voice options for a reason, not because of money.
varying degrees of localizer nonsense in them. Do I think it should stop you from playing these games entirely? That's up to you to
Nah.
decide. I do think there's a difference between the activism of devs versus the localizers. Because from what I'm told, most localization is done in house at a single studio that translates most other languages for a single game. They work as contractors mostly, like I said, once it's done, they don't really face the consequences of their actions. Do I think you're a hypocrite if you complain about localization while also playing games with bad
Nah.
localization? I don't. It's like saying you're a hypocrite because you dislike your government, yet you have to pay taxes to that same government. These sorts of problems are just complicated. In localization, anyways, the problem is far harder to change than, say, when a game is openly just slop, like Dustborn is. Because in Dustborn's case, it's just bad. We can all see that. You don't need a
Yeah.
localizer to change dialogue for you to see that Dustborn is just very clearly low quality all around. Like, Dustborn has its villains be conservatives
And they do this on purpose, like I said. You gotta use a black person for trashy means, and just everything they're used for is going to tank and go down. It's like they're doing with Assassin's Creed. So you'll start to see that you're not going to see any equality with it. And plus, I mean, even when like they would get chosen for like a community to develop things, they know that their race is not really created for coding like that. It's not really in their DNA. So this is not really their world. It's just understanding how things work. Can there be some that are good at coding? Yeah, absolutely, that can happen. But if you look at the large majority by ratio, not even close. But like I said, these are agendas that are being pushed for a reason. So we got to look at the people behind it. Like I said, it's these individuals that are running things right now. Definitely when they try to do enforcements where they just don't belong, it's just like way out of place. And people should be put where they belong, not where they don't belong for the wrong means. And that's a huge problem right now as we see that.
basically. That's not a localizer choice. That was something that was chosen again by the people at the top of that studio, in this
Yeah,
case, Red Thread
exactly.
Games. I think if people play Metaphor or Dragon Ball, you're not supporting bad localization necessarily, you're supporting the devs behind those games. And in
Mm-hmm.
localization changes in the future, anyways, it's going to be really hard and insufferable to change. But from what I'm told on these projects and more, is that the industry is in a very bad spot when it comes to DEI and propaganda being pushed. Like I said
Pretty
earlier,
much.
many of the people I've spoken to say that they will get blacklisted and fired if they were to be discovered talking to me, which is really
So you see, guys, just think about what that is. There's no freedom in any of this and anything that he's saying. This is like enslavement and developing like this in fear. Definitely like if you're a new person, you're not experienced, you don't know what you're doing. They get rid of all the masters, they fire them. You have to have 2 years less of experience, have to be non-binary, woman. All this stuff is just like all wrong, you know what I mean? And then these people are running around knowing how things are going. They may keep around the devs that didn't rebel against them, so they'll work with them. But there's only going to be a bunch of problems with this. Unfinished games, unoptimized bugs. But you have way more technology and way more money and staff that you've ever had in your entire life. But you see, you can't replace the soul. You can't replace that inequality. You remove those individuals, you'll see, man, I wish I would, we had the same quality we had, in the Sega Dreamcast days or SNES days or, PS2 days. But technology was way less. But guess what? Those individuals were there. If they were here, it would only get better because you have the same individuals becoming even more masterful, being able to train students through the right way. This is all wrong. and they have no real masters to train them, to pass the torch to, and they know this.
Sad to see, because what this really means is that these devs are genuinely not allowed to speak their minds about things these days at all, unless
Yeah,
it's approved by the hive mind, if you will. This isn't healthy, and frankly, it's pathetic that the industry has instilled this cult like behavior that every person I speak to has to either seen it all happen or dealt with it themselves.
that's right. It's a dark religious cult. It's an evil cult. People are seeing it, just like what the Dragon Quest director really said recently. You see, we're dealing with the evil cult. It's unfair. He knows what it is. They know what it is. You know what I mean? People are starting to see it now, just like all the stuff is coming out with D and everything else. Like even though that's like nothing new, I knew about this for a long time. I've been telling people, it's just the way that industry works. It's the way the evil spirits at high power positions in the world. It tells you that right in scripture. We don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but against evil spirits in the heavenly realms in high places. So you're dealing with evil, and this is nothing but evil. It's pretty obvious. They don't give a shit about our world. It's like one of the best worlds you could have, and now look what they're trying to do with it. And look how they disrespect other countries. You know, look at what they did with Japan, you know, recently with Assassin's Creed. Look at what they're doing with all the franchises you cared about, just in general, just for more greed, and they don't need the money. They're just doing this because they're evil. It's very similar. But evil don't last forever, you know. All the other evils before, they get taken down. Its time is short. It don't have forever, and it knows that. So it wants to ruin as much as it can. But I always remember this if you guys are worried. The way the universe is set up, light will always prevail and win. You can't take it down. That's like saying you would have took down the sun and corrupted it. Has that ever happened? No. Not gonna ever happen. That's the prime example right there in front of everybody. They can't do anything about that.
Throw all the massive budgets, localizing, or stagnant growth aside, the activism and fear of retribution by these powerful entity driven executives is actually what's killing a lot of your favorite games. Everything
Yeah.
else I've said are added layers on the crap pie that they're also serving you. As my source told me, they couldn't believe their eyes when they saw stuff like Fair Games getting announced, calling it a hypocritical dumpster fire that they really hope fails because, as they said, it's a game about stealing from the rich that is being made by a company like PlayStation, which is obviously wealthy, and then it stars people of color that are just robbing people of their valuables, which is not a good look. They do think that the industry is being torn apart from opposing angles by all of these problems. Things are way too expensive, yet they also claim that the technology has never been better.
Somebody's gonna get another Concord failure with this game. They should not release it, but guess what? They're getting funded, so they're not spending that much money. It's just going to look bad for them, and their stock is going to attack everything. They're going to attack every Japanese company that they can. They're going to try everything. Just going to have to keep fighting them and not support them.
And should, in theory, allow for things to be made for less resources than before. But because of the massive overspending and scoping and these modern AAA games that these studios, they end up bloating up in order to fulfill what they actually deem important.
So you guys kind of get the idea here. This is just some inside intel. I'm going to link the rest of this in my description if you want to watch the rest. But he's pretty much telling you, you know, the core of everything. And we've been talking about this. And it's good to see that, you know, if that happened, that developers come out, which, you know, I'm highly going to give this the benefit of the doubt that, you know, that's what's going on. And we know that's what's going on. So like, subscribe, y'all. Let me know what y'all think. Yeah, this just sucks. But we got to do our job by continuing to make games like Concord perform the way they do and let all these games flop and fail. And if we stick to our values and keep doing the right things and stick together, they're going to eventually have no choice. So let me know what y'all think. All right, y'all. Peace out.